As we continue our study of the Catholic or general epistles, we turn to the book of James. It is not certain who wrote this book. Some think that it was written by James, the brother of Jesus, while others think it was another James who helped lead the early church. Either way, this book is very different from much of the New Testament. In fact, some argue that it has a greater connection with the Old Testament than the New Testament, partly because of the way it is written and partly because of its theological emphasis. Because of this connection, the book of James has been called New Testament wisdom. For those of you who have completed Module 3, you may remember the term wisdom refers to a style of writing in the Old Testament that concentrates on discovering God's intended order of things. Wisdom material is focused on teaching about doing the right thing, as seen in the book of Proverbs. Likewise, James is a book that is concerned with how to live out a life of faith and does not focus on just the specifics of belief. Also, in a similar fashion to the Old Testament book of Proverbs, the book of James moves around a lot and not only emphasizes that faith is found in what you do, but covers many other topics as well. The book of James begins with an exploration of trials and temptations, and your reading explored these two challenges of faith. James tells us not to fear, but to celebrate and rejoice in trials, for they provide us an opportunity to grow in our faith. Like strenuous exercise strengthens our body, trials and persecution builds our soul. James is not so positive about temptations, and sees temptations as only having bad results. He also emphasizes a difference in the origin of trials and temptations. Trials, these external challenges of our faith, can be allowed by God for our growth and maturity. Temptations are not from God, but are born from our own sinful desires. James also warns us about favoritism in the church, which we explored in chapter 2. He reasons that faith in Christ means that we should treat everyone as close neighbors, regardless of a person's wealth and status. James warns us that by playing favorites to those who have wealth and power, we ignore and insult the poor and humble who are just as worthy of our attention. Jesus' call to love our neighbors as ourselves means that we should treat everyone as close neighbors, not just the wealthy. Of course, James also points out that ironically, those we treat with special favor are also the ones who will persecute us. Yet another reason to treat all people equally. The most memorable part of James is the second half of chapter 2, which is the part that the church has emphasized over the centuries. It reminds us that there is no way that we can separate our actions from our beliefs. Boldly, James declares that faith without action is dead. For those who take pride in believing that Jesus is the Son of God, James reminds them that the demons affirm this as well. What should set us apart is the way our faith and beliefs are expressed in what we do. What we do with our hands, the way we serve, the way we give are all evidence of what we say we hold dear. Think of it this way. If a man says he loves his wife but never treats her with kindness, never expresses his love for her, and never spends time with her, couldn't his love for her be questioned? In the same way, James explains that the love of Christ must be expressed in what we do. Others should know who we are simply by the way that we serve. The last section we studied was in James chapter 3. Here, James talks about the power of the tongue, which has serious potential for life or destruction. He compares it to the bridle on a horse, the rudder on a ship, and a flame. Each of these things, a flame, a bridle, and a rudder, are tiny compared to the things they are a part of. But despite their size, they are deceptively powerful. The tongue, a small part of the body, is capable of being greatly constructive or destructive. James reminds us that sometimes what comes out of our mouth is very different from what we say has transformed inside of us. To be clear, James is not talking here about curse words or improper language. He's talking about the destructive, mean, and humiliating words we use with others. This idea should remind us of his discussions of faith and works. James teaches that what comes out of our mouth must reflect what's in our hearts. Now, spend some time on the relational questions to see how this book speaks to your life.